Welcome to Sideline Sports, where we give you an up-close and personal look at the teams, coaches, and athletes that make up the South Sound. Here's your host, Jeff Slakey.
Feels good to be back at Sideline Sports. I'm Jeff Slakey, and this week, Shelton Football battling Montesano, the 45th annual tugboat races in Olympia. Fans are weighing in on the NFL anthem policy, and our game of the week, it's Shelton Football hosting Capital.
This portion of Sideline Sports is being brought to you in part by
Mason General Hospital, United Community, Empowered People, Exceptional Health. Shelton Football back on the field this past week, taking on a tough Montesano squad.
The Shelton High Climbers were back on the football field Friday night, facing Montesano in their first road game of the season. The Bulldogs opened the scoring just 3 minutes into the first quarter on a 1-yard touchdown run from Brent Hollitz. Montesano would add 2 more touchdowns in the second quarter, taking a 22-0 lead into halftime. Down 31-0 in the third quarter, Shelton would find the back of the end zone on a 63-yard run from Josiah Oles. Montesano would add 3 more scores late in the contest on their way to a 51-6 victory. Montesano junior receiver Sam Winter finished with 2 touchdown catches. Winter was happy with his team's overall performance.
The 2 touchdown passes, Shady threw some great balls. Offensive line gave him enough time to throw it. And I thought our special teams did really well, setting up the returns. We really tried working hard on that in practice. I thought it was a lot better.
The High Climbers are back on the field Friday hosting Capital. I'm Sean Wells, Fry Fiber One Sports.
Sideline Sports is being brought to you in part by
The Gillis Auto Center. At Gillis, you're covered forever. A big crowd gathered in Olympia for the annual tugboat races.
A fun time was had in Olympia this weekend, celebrating the 45th annual Olympia Harper Days Vintage Tugboat Races. More than 15 tugboats competed in 3 different classifications. The tugboat started at Percival Landing and raced out in the deep harbor past Butler Cove. One tugboat competing named Sandman was built in 1910 by the Olympia Sand and Gravel Company. Sandman Foundation President Doug Eklund says the tugboat was in working service until 1975. Eklund says his dad would chase the Sandman around the harbor as a kid in the 1930s.
He and his buddy Augie would go on to the 4th Avenue Bridge and they had a game that they would play. They would be looking for where in the busy city of Olympia Harbor Sandman was working for today. So in the 1950s, when I was a little kid, my dad taught me to watch Sandman, and from our house out on Cooper Point, I could watch it going back and forth, and it was busy all the time. It was pulling logs, it was pulling sawdust, it was pulling barges full of lumber. It was just going back and forth all the time.
Eklund says the Sandman is a floating museum and is free for tours on most weekends docked in the Percival Landing. I'm Sean Wells, Fry Fiber One Sports.
Sideline Sports is being brought to you in part by
Maple Glen Senior Living, celebrating the art of life. South Sound fans weighed in on NFL players protesting the national anthem.
Despite Thursday night marking the official return of the 2018 National Football League regular season, it's still unclear whether players will be forced to stand or allowed to kneel during the national anthem. NFL owners and the NFL Players Association are working on a compromise that might not be reached for the coming days or even weeks into the regular season. iFiber One News Radio spoke with South Sound residents who gave mixed opinions on what players should be allowed to do during the national anthem.
And for the national anthem, that's just for our veterans and everyone who have served and done something for our country.
Anybody that does stuff like that's insulting me and everybody else. That's it.
Just to be patriotic for their country. I mean, we have service people that go and fight and lose their lives for us, and I think it's the least they can do is to stand for the national anthem.
I think we should show respect to our flag and our country by standing for the national anthem.
I think that it's okay. They can go either way. It's a free country.
I said I've always stood for the national anthem. I believe in this country, but I guess that's one way of signifying it, but not everybody else has to do that. I don't think they should be punished for it.
Out of respect for our country, they should stand. I know it is their right to do as they feel, but out of respect for what this country has given everyone, I think they should stand, yes.
So I spent 27 years in the military, And the reason I did that is so that we could have all the freedoms that we enjoy, and one of those freedoms is freedom of speech. So if they want to do that, I wouldn't do that, but if they choose to use their freedom that way, then I'm okay.
The Seattle Seahawks open the 2018 season at the Denver Broncos this Sunday. I'm Sean Wells, Fry Fiber One News.
Some scores for you in football. Tumwater over Yelm, 17-14. North Thurston 21, Port Angeles 7. Peninsula 19, Skyline 14. In girls soccer, Shelton 2, Elma 0. Olympia 4, Capital 1. And Timberline over Centralia 4-0. In volleyball, Gig Harbor 3, Timberline 1. Capital 3, Central Kitsap 0. And Peninsula 3, Shelton 0. Our game of the week is Shelton Football hosting Capital. The High Climbers are looking for their first win of the season, coming off a tough 51-6 loss at Montesano. Capital comes to the contest with a 2-0 record with wins over Lakes and WF West. The Cougars got the better of Shelton when the two teams met last season, winning 49-17. Kickoff Friday night, 7 o'clock from High Climber Stadium. Upcoming games in football, it's North Mason versus Olympic, Timberline versus Gig Harbor, and Central Kitsap versus Yelm. In girls soccer, Shelton versus Peninsula, Gig Harbor versus Timberline, and North Thurston versus Yelm. And in volleyball, Shelton travels to Yelm, Timberline takes on Capital, and Central Kitsap. This has been another presentation of Sideline Sports. I'm Jeff Slakey.